To get really technical for a moment, what we have here is a system that's founded on certain assumptions, and that depends on those assumptions being accurate to within a certain margin of error in order for the system to keep functioning instead of breaking down. In this case, it's a political system. The assumptions were made about human behavior, and in order to contain human behavior within the margin of error the system can handle, the flow of information to the people in the system has to be limited in order to limit the choices the people will be able to think of. If the purpose of the education system really is to further democracy, instead of to further the rich white man's traditional domination of the world, why is it that the people in America who traditionally have been caught at the losing end of the rich white man's domination of the world, and who have become the champions of equal rights, are also the ones who always get caught at the losing end of the education system? Who is it in our political system who's so afraid of what will happen if the champions of equal rights get an equal education? And what are those people afraid of? Too much democracy breaking out? I don't mean to single President Obama out, but as a black guy who graduated from Harvard Law School and is now the most powerful man on earth, he makes a good example of how a lot of traditional American values have come into conflict within our education system and are creating conflict within our political system. In his book, he says that even after he graduated from Harvard, sometimes he'd be standing out in front of an expensive restaurant waiting for the valet to bring him his car, and some white people walked up to him and handed him their keys because they assumed he was the valet. Now, he certainly seems to be a nice guy and to mean well, and he can give powerful speeches and make big promises. But this is a secular government, and we are in a war of ideas. Ultimately, we're not paying our president to be a nice guy, or to mean well, or to be a token black guy, or to give powerful speeches, or to make big promises. We're paying him to be the most powerful man on earth, and to carry out the responsibilities that come with that. The question is, did his Harvard education prepare him for the political situation we are now in, or didn't it? Over the course of this video, I will show why the difficulties our president has run into since he took office are not because of personal failures of his own. It wouldn't have made a difference who we elected. Voting for Republicans this year won't save us, and neither will voting for Democrats again next election save us. We have a secular government that was founded on pre-scientific ideology. With the political system we have, and the education system that trains Americans to use that political system, no one, not even a black guy who graduated from Harvard, has a broad enough understanding of the problem to see it through to a solution. Because he majored in law. His education prepared him for a specialized field. Not even the President of the United States majored in everything in the entire world, because nobody can. As for all those college-educated people in America who aren't president, it never ceases to amaze me how many college-educated Americans I meet who don't consider themselves racist or sexist or anything of the sort, but who are convinced that saving the world depends on getting more decision-making power for themselves and their own group, and preventing anyone else from getting more decision-making power for themselves. Well, decision-making power means self-determination. And that's how the struggle for voting rights for every group in America has always worked. The people who have the voting rights are always afraid to give another group of people the right to vote, because they know that if they do, that group of people, with their different history and their different worldviews, are going to vote for things that are different from what the people who already have the right to vote have been voting for. So every struggle for the self-determination of a group of people in the history of America has always been met with heavy resistance by people who consider themselves red-blooded American citizens, but who are afraid of democracy. This intellectual feudal system that we call our education system is no different. If more black people learned reliable information that was relevant to civil rights, political stuff would happen, and it wouldn't be stuff that was favorable to the white man's domination of the world. But instead of that, science education, like the education system in general, is based on the assumption that the teaching styles that worked for the white people who founded the education system are supposed to work for everybody. And when they don't, that makes a convenient way to prove that the people who didn't succeed in the education system either weren't smart enough or weren't willing to work hard enough. So why would college-educated people want people like that to have more decision-making power? Take the way education is divided up into classes, for example. It's easy to think that it's common sense that people should spend 45 minutes a day thinking about math and 45 minutes a day thinking about English and then history and so on, when you lead a sheltered enough life to have the luxury of deciding what you want to think about over the course of a day. But what about all the people who don't have that luxury? What are they supposed to do? For people who grow up in situations where a lot of stuff happens all at once that has big effects on their lives, how are you going to convince them to stop thinking about one thing and start thinking about another? How are you going to get them to focus their attention on your lesson material? How are you going to earn their trust and their respect by acting like just another college graduate who thinks they know everything? If you want to teach people who are affected by a lot of stuff all at the same time, you have to be a wise person who knows a lot about a lot of different things and set an example for them as someone who has integrated all their knowledge and puts it to use. How are you going to be a teacher if you can't even be a role model? Now, a solution to global warming depends on global cooperation. And what do we have in America but science education that's dominated by white people who are convinced that anyone who knows as much about science as they do should want the same things they want, and that anyone who doesn't want the same things they want can't possibly understand science. So in effect, science education in America has been turned into just another religion for white people that supposedly proves that whatever they feel to be true must be true, and that anyone who disagrees with them just isn't smart enough to know any better. As environmental scientists are warning everyone now, politics in the 21st century is going to be dominated by global warming. The education system that was founded by rich white men trains Americans how to dominate the world. So longer school days and longer school years and everyone studying harder to be more successful in the world domination education system isn't going to solve the problem.